Revenge with Karen. You should really smile more during demos. You look like a librarian who just smelled a fart. That was my first introduction to Tyler, the CEO's son, freshly unboxed from Wharton and already walking around like he was about to be knighted for disrupting staplers. He said that to me while eating a protein bar shaped like a doorstop, standing in front of the architecture I spent 6 years building from the ground up. 6 years of caffeine-induced insomnia, patching vulnerabilities while half the office was at Coachella or some other corporate-sanctioned bacchanalia. 6 years of duct-taping compliance requirements to real-time encryption and making it dance without ever once crashing. And now here was this smug baby MBA calling me tech support in a cardigan because I dared to wear wool in August. They'd asked me to sit in on the investor pitch prep, not present, mind you. Sit. Observe. I smiled politely while Tyler mispronounced the very terms I coined and confused AES with AI, like he was reading from a bad chatbot script. Apparently, I was too intense to face the investors. You know how engineers get, the COO muttered to HR once, thinking I was out of earshot. Brilliant, but weird. Yeah, well, your wife's hairdresser uses my password manager. Small world. But here's the funny part. For all the posturing, the private jets, motivational Slack messages about synergy, none of them ever looked at the code-base metadata. None of them knew that buried deep in that system, the one they're now trying to sell for a neat $90 million, was a heartbeat signature. Mine. A heartbeat the system checks every time it boots. Not biometric, not retinal, not fingerprint, mine. And if that heartbeat disappears for more than 48 hours, the encryption key fragments irreversibly. I didn't do that out of spite. I did it because they refused to pay for a second security engineer. Look, I'm not bitter. I'm not some vengeful genius hiding behind horn-rimmed glasses and trauma. I just got tired of being the only person in the room who could tell the difference between a network breach and someone opening too many tabs. I made something airtight. They ignored it because I drink instant coffee and wear payless loafers. Joke's on them. Shoes don't squeak when you walk into a boardroom uninvited. And speaking of ignoring things, if you've made it this far and haven't hit the subscribe button, what are you doing? You're already deep in the weeds with me. Might as well make it official. Go ahead, subscribe. It keeps this story engine running smoother than Tyler's gelled hair after a midday ego boost. Really helps the team keep the Marlboros lit and the microphones hot. Anyway, after Tyler's fart joke and his PowerPoint tantrum, I was told I'd be handling the back-end prep for the investor pitch. In English, that meant I'd be making sure nothing exploded while he demoed software he couldn't spell. He handed me a checklist that looked like it was written by ChatGPT after 3 cocktails. Make encryption work good, remove bugs, ensure seamless synergetic output. I think he thought if he used enough buzzwords, the server would just smile and comply. I said nothing. I took the list. I nodded. Then I went back to my desk and did what I always do when men like Tyler start puffing their chests, silently prep the tripwire. There's a line between being humble and being invisible. I walked that line every day. No title inflation, no stock options, no glossy awards, just me, my keyboard, and a heartbeat signature hidden 3 layers deep in a system they couldn't rebuild if they tried. But let them try, please. I'd love to see Tyler explain to the investors why the core authentication suddenly defaults to a null string if I get terminated. So yeah, I prepped for the pitch. I even cleaned the sandbox logs and made sure the load balancer wouldn't choke when they clicked Run Simulation. But I also did something else. I tethered my heartbeat check to a passive monitor, my knockoff smartwatch. Not for security, for insurance. If I get cut off, the system alerts the investor. No fireworks, no alarm bells, just a soft little message encrypted and sent to one inbox. One person, one question. Who owns this code? And if they ask me directly, if they have the nerve to finally ask, I'll tell them calmly, smiling like a librarian who just finished reading their obituary aloud. The first real crack in the dam came during a Thursday prep meeting, 2 days before the pitch. Tyler rolled in late, reeking of mint vape and startup desperation, and plopped into the chair like gravity owed him something. He looked around, smirked at the assembled team, marketing, finance, one guy from DevOps who hadn't blinked since 2019, and then looked at me like I was the janitor who'd overstayed her welcome. "Margaret," he said, drawing out the syllables like my name was a nuisance he had to wipe off his shoe. "We've decided you won't be in the room for the demo. Investors want clean lines, young energy, not back-end vibes." Back-end vibes. I looked up from my notes. "You mean the system I built from scratch? The one we're selling? The one with 5 active compliance certifications tied to my name?" He waved me off with a chuckle like I was an elderly aunt worried about microwave radiation. "It's all in the deck. You've done great work, really. Let the suits talk now. This is the big leagues." I could have responded. Could have listed the 14 separate regulatory checkpoints that had my name stamped on them like a cursed signature. Could have pulled up the multi-jurisdictional clause that said only a certified architect could demo live encryption for cross-border investors. Instead, I stared at his $400 haircut and thought, this is how systems fail, one smug haircut at a time. He kept talking. "We'll be demoing a simulation environment anyway. What could possibly go wrong?" That was the moment. That's when I felt the shift. Not panic, not even anger. Just that deep, bone-level click that happens when you stop hoping they'll see your worth and start documenting their downfall. I went back to my office and closed the door. Not slammed, just closed. Then I pulled up the root-level settings panel. It was a hidden utility, one of the many I had embedded in the system over the years, partly for efficiency, mostly because I never trusted the clowns upstairs to keep their fingers off the detonator. From there, I activated lattice mode. That's not its real name, of course. I just liked how it sounded. Lattice mode doesn't break anything, doesn't alter functionality or make the system hiccup. It just watches. It logs every unauthorized access attempt to restricted modules, every falsified credential, every click into something they never should have touched. Then it routes the data, encrypted, compartmentalized, signed, to a private server only I control. The cherry on top, a mirrored alert sent silently to my smartwatch, dressed up as a generic health notification. So when Tyler or whatever intern he weaponized tried to bypass the authentication layer during the demo, I wouldn't need to be there. My wrist would buzz like a mosquito at a barbecue. I'd know the fools have officially opened the wrong drawer. I don't get mad. I get methodical. To be clear, I warned him. I walked straight back into the glass box they call a war room, past the catered sushi and the vision boards that looked like Pinterest had a seizure, and I told him, "Tyler, you're planning to demo a compliance-bound encryption tool without the licensed architect present. If you touch anything under Layer 3 without my handoff key, you're exposing the company to federal penalties. And if you simulate authentication with dummy data, that's falsification." He blinked at me like I was speaking binary. "Margaret, no one's going to arrest us for showing a prototype. Chill. Go take a nap or something. Go take a nap." I turned and walked out before I said something career-ending, not for me, for him. That night, I added one more rule to the monitor. If the system registers more than 3 failed access attempts to the credential vault, it sends a silent ping to one additional address, the legal team of our lead investor. Just a contingency. Insurance, like buckling your seatbelt before the wreck. By Friday morning, they'd already begun rehearsing without me. I walked past the boardroom and saw Tyler standing in front of the screen, gesturing with all the subtlety of a mime on meth. I paused just long enough to watch him stumble over the word decentralized before my wrist buzzed. One failed access attempt. I smiled, then kept walking. The rumor hit like black mold, slow, silent, and spreading through the drywall while everyone pretended it was just a weird smell. It started with one of those fake casual check-ins. "Hey, just wondering, is Margaret okay?" Then came the sudden drop in invites. No more all hands, no calendar pings, not even a Slack reaction when I posted that the load test passed at 400% projected demand. Next, a project manager, new, too young to know better, slid up to me by the espresso machine and said, "Just between us girls, do you ever worry you're like too siloed?" I looked her dead in the eye and said, "No, I worry you're not siloed enough." She blinked, laughed nervously, and scurried off, like I'd coughed up a bat. By Tuesday, someone from HR accidentally sent me a calendar invite to a performance review that didn't include me on the panel. I opened it out of curiosity and found the words, "not team-oriented," "rigid," and my personal favourite, "highly replaceable post-funding." Bold of them to put that in writing. Even bolder to think I wouldn't see it. That afternoon, I logged in to prep for a routine stability check. My admin access was gone, not downgraded. Gone, just a red banner across the dashboard. Insufficient permissions. No warning, no explanation, just silence where my control had always been. I sat still for 5 full minutes, not angry, not sad, just still. Then I picked up my jacket and took a walk 5 blocks down, past the glass buildings and food trucks, to a narrow brownstone that still had a buzzer instead of a facial recognition camera. I rang once. A second later, a gravelly voice called out from inside. "If it's about funding, I already gave at the blood bank." "It's Margaret," I said. The door opened. Abe was the last original co-founder, still technically on paper. The others had cashed out, burned out, or married someone with a yoga apparel line. Abe, though, he'd been the one to hire me. He was the one who read my original spec sheet and said, "This is dangerous, I like it." His office hadn't changed, still smelled like old solder and cheap cigars. He poured coffee into a chipped mug that said, "Root access is my love language," and motioned for me to sit. "They're icing you out," he said without needing to ask. "They pulled my access," he grunted. "Rookies?" I didn't explain. I just asked one question. "Is the clause still valid?" He didn't answer at first. Just turned to the dusty bookshelf, reached behind a copy of Hacking for Dummies and pulled out a thick black binder with a dog-eared post-it that read, "In case of idiots." He flipped to the page, showed me the paragraph. Highlighted, underlined, initialed. Clause 14b. Any architecture authored and deployed under private contract, not explicitly transferred via written release, remains the sole property of the developer. No retroactive claim applies. I stared at it. "You never signed it over," Abe said. I always wondered if that was on purpose. "It was." He nodded, like he'd just confirmed a weather forecast. "Then let them burn." I thanked him. I left, and somewhere between that brownstone and the cold marble lobby of my office building, the sting of betrayal melted into clarity. They weren't just cutting me out, they were trying to ghostwrite the ending of my story, thinking I wouldn't have a backup draft. They didn't realise the story was mine to begin with. They thought the code was company property. What they didn't know was that the foundational logic, the true engine behind the encryption, was built using a framework I designed years before I ever joined the company. A framework I never registered under their banner. A framework that on paper still lived under my name, under a private LLC I'd quietly formed the same week I took the job. They assumed I was just a coder with good aim. But I was the copyright holder of the language they'd been shouting in. Let them rehearse. Let them polish their pitches and polish each other's egos. Let them rewrite the org chart and redraw the seating plan. When the lights go out, they'll realise the only person who can flip the breaker is the one they just ghosted. Investor Day smelled like money and panic sweat. The conference room had been gutted and rebuilt with temporary LED panels and branded step and repeats, like someone was trying to launch a hedge fund on the set of a game show. The coffee was artisanal, the pastries had names, and the interns were handing out brochures that looked like they'd been printed with angel tears. They sat me in the back. No name tag, no introduction, just a plastic folding chair with a view of the exit sign. Tyler, naturally, was centre stage, flanked by 2 executives who looked like they'd been printed from the same smug template. His tie was too tight, his smile too wide, his confidence too loud for someone whose demo had failed 3 times in the past week behind closed doors. He opened with a joke. Something about firewalls and fire drills. It landed like a thud in a morgue, but no one cared. They were all too busy eyeing the slides behind him. Glowing graphs, product renderings, charts that bent up and to the right, like salvation itself. Tyler could have said the system ran on hamster wheels and cheap vodka, and they would have clapped because the room was thick with anticipation. $90 million was in the air. Then he hit the encryption demo. The system purred, fast and fluid, responding to commands like it was reading minds. A few VCs exchanged impressed glances. One even murmured, "This is elegant." I didn't blink. They had no idea they were looking at a hollow puppet. A working illusion, sure, but an illusion nonetheless. What they were watching was a rehearsed loop inside a sandboxed clone of the architecture, running only because I'd stripped out the deeper verification layers. If they tried to stress test it, crack it open for scaling or regulatory use, the whole thing would have spit out an error code and a soft little message. Contact original architect for access rights. Tyler didn't know that. He was too busy riding the sugar high of applause. Then came the voice. It belonged to a woman in her 40s, crisp suit, ice blue nails that probably cost more than my car's timing belt. She was introduced earlier as VP of Strategic Infrastructure. Translation, the one who actually reads the fine print. She raised one eyebrow and asked like she was ordering a coffee. "Who owns the underlying encryption framework?" Tyler blinked, stuttered for just half a second. Then he smiled. "Company property, of course. All developed in-house." The room nodded and moved on. Tablets tapped. The lie floated out like a helium balloon, confident, bright, and stupid. And then, buzz. My smartwatch vibrated. It was subtle. No one saw. No one cared. But I looked down anyway just once. One new voice message. Encrypted, authenticated, sender, investors at Archon Capital, timestamp, real time. I tapped to play in the tiniest whisper of volume. A voice, refined, skeptical, came through. "Margaret, we're told the architecture is yours. Is the encryption your personal IP?" I stared at the screen, my own reflection in the glass. Calm, tired, unshaken. My thumb hovered over the reply button. I didn't press it. Not yet. Instead, I slipped the watch beneath my sleeve and crossed my legs. In the front, Tyler was spinning some garbage metaphor about how the code was like a trust fall in the cloud. Someone actually clapped. I leaned back in my folding chair and watched him paint his masterpiece of nonsense, every stroke sealing his fate. Because now the investors knew. Now they were asking me directly. And the best part? They hadn't even seen the clause yet. Tyler caught me before I could leave the building, all synthetic charm and glossy teeth, standing like a sales rep who just upsold a pensioner on an NFT course. He blocked the hallway with the confidence of a man who's never been told no by anyone who wasn't paid to say it. Behind him, the investors were still shaking hands and complimenting the kombucha bar. The smell of fake citrus and real arrogance clung to the air. "Margaret," he said, voice dipped in fake warmth. "Quick chat." I didn't answer, just stared at the red folder tucked under his arm like a party favor from hell. He stepped closer, lowering his voice like we were co-conspirators. "Dad says you're terminated. Effective immediately." He smiled like it was a reward. "Nothing personal, just time to streamline things. You know how it is." Oh, I knew. "You've done great work, but now that the system's proven, we need to scale without dependencies." He said that last word with a little pause, like he thought it might be too technical for me. Then he slid the red folder into my hands. "There's your severance check. Be generous, honestly, and the NDA. Just your standard don't ruin our fundraising language. Legal says you'll want to sign today so we can move forward clean." He tapped the folder like a waiter setting down a lukewarm steak. I opened it slowly, not out of confusion, just timing. Inside, a check for $12,000, the price of silence apparently, and a 4-page document that boiled down to one command: disappear. He watched me read it, waiting for a crack in my expression. I gave him nothing. I closed the folder, then nodded. Okay, I said softly. Okay? He blinked, caught off guard by how easy that was. I nodded again. I understand. His shoulders dropped, victory already oozing from his pores. I turned away, walked back down the hallway, past the reception desk, the glass-walled meeting rooms, the little shelf with fake awards they'd printed themselves. My heels echoed faintly against the tile. In the elevator, I opened my smartwatch interface. No hesitation, no dramatics, just one flick of my finger. Trigger. Ownership challenge active. The screen flashed once. A small icon blinked green. A quiet ping confirmed the signal was sent. The legal timestamp, the IP registration certificate, the clause scans, all precompiled and uploaded to the investor's audit team the moment my employment status was flagged as terminated. No sirens, no emails, no confrontation. Just a clean rupture. The kind that doesn't bleed until it's too late to suture. The kind that lawyers don't see coming until it's already inside the firewall. By the time I stepped out onto the sidewalk, the sky had turned slate grey. Rain smelled close. Thunder rumbled like distant applause. I kept walking. Tyler thought he had erased me. Thought he'd pinned the last butterfly to the board, labelled it, and moved on. But he didn't know I was the one holding the scalpel. Didn't see the silent ink under the glossy pitch. Didn't know the encryption engine had a legal tripwire tied not to the code, but to me. And now every investor in that room, every executive on that call, was about to receive the same quiet packet. Chain of ownership disputed. Licensing invalid without original architect's release. Tyler would hear about it in roughly 10 minutes. Dad would hear 5 minutes after that. And by the time they called a meeting, they'd realize something they'd never even thought to check. I never signed over the soul of